Welcome to a replay of one of the most popular episodes from our 2025 season of our podcast series for financial advisors, Rise and Reinvent, Joe Duran on building and rebuilding world-class firms. It's a conversation with the managing partner of Rise Growth Partners. I'm Louis Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for Financial Advisors.
At Diamond Consultants, we help elite advisors identify the right environment for their businesses to thrive, whether that's at a wirehouse, boutique, or independent firm. With nearly 3 decades of experience, we've guided thousands of advisors and represented more than $250 billion in assets transitioned. And each year, 1 in 4 advisors managing $1 billion or more who change firms are our clients. Our process is education-driven and based on building relationships, starting as your strategic partner well before you're even thinking of a move. To schedule a confidential conversation, call us at 908-879-1002. Wondering why advisors change firms and where they're headed? Are transition deals going up or down? Those very questions and more inspired us to create our annual Advisor Transition Report. It's the award-winning, data-driven resource designed for advisors that connects the dots between the motivations around movement and the firm's appetite for top talent. Arm yourself with the knowledge you need to make smart decisions. Download your copy at diamond-consultants.com/transition report.
Joe Duran's career has always been about reaching new heights and then helping others climb their own. A proverbial mountain climber himself, he built and sold 2 of the most successful firms in the RIA space, Centurion Capital and United Capital. Today, Joe sees himself as the Sherpa, guiding the next generation of entrepreneurs through his latest venture, Rise Growth Partners. His story is one of constant reinvention, relentless curiosity, and the humility to keep asking one simple question: what if I'm wrong? Joe first joined us on the show back in 2020, shortly after the sale of United Capital to Goldman Sachs. Now, with the benefit of both hindsight and foresight, we revisit that experience and explore the mindset behind building truly world-class firms. We dive into what it takes to stay relevant in an industry that never stops changing. Joe shares why the best leaders continually challenge their own assumptions, what it means to learn from clients instead of competitors, and why being great doesn't necessarily mean being the biggest. He also reflects on how the industry can avoid the risk of mega RIAs repeating the mistakes of the wirehouses. It's a candid and thought-provoking conversation about reinvention, leadership, value creation, and what it means to evolve, from mountain climber to Sherpa. So let's get to it. Joe, thanks for joining us today. I've been extremely excited to interview you and a lot to talk about today.
Well, it's great to be here, and I'm excited to be here too. And hopefully we're going to have a fun-packed and also interesting 45 minutes. I try not to be boring, but I'm excited about it.
Awesome. I think even if you were boring, you have such a interesting journey and so many interesting learnings that I think our audience will give you a free pass.
Good. I hope so.
So let's jump in. Tell us a bit about your upbringing and maybe some early experiences that shaped your philosophy on being a business builder.
Well, I was born in Barcelona, Spain. Most people don't know that. And then I was in 5 different countries before I was 5 years old in Zimbabwe. So we moved from Spain when I was 2, then to Portugal, then to England, then to South Africa, and then to Zimbabwe ultimately. It was Rhodesia at the time when I first got there. That forced me to learn 4 different languages. I started to Spanish, then went to Portuguese, then went to English, then went to Dutch. Then my parents sent me to an all Afrikaans school. And from preschool till, frankly, kindergarten, different languages, different people. And I'd say that lesson number 1 was adaptability. I would arrive, I was fairly dorky, slightly chubby, and didn't even understand the language. So I think I learned very early on to be self-sufficient and that I'm responsible for my own life. I happen to have, in addition, growing up in what was Rhodesia, and it was a war-torn country. It was a civil war going on at the time. And my parents were, well, my dad was awful. I stopped seeing him after 12 years, physically incredibly violent to me personally. So that was hard. They also had no money, and I had to work since the age of 10 years old. I used to sell hot dogs at 10 years old to make a living. Never stopped working till I was 18. Didn't have a choice. And so, second lesson, I guess, work ethic. If you got to do something, you got to do it and you got to work. I was an awful student, but I was an okay worker. And I was a pretty good rugby player too, by the way. And then one thing I will share about the experience, again, learned all these languages, was very much alone, but I was pretty good at having people follow me. I always was quite good at, usually for bad things. I was a troublemaker growing up and I was an awful student. But I also realized right around 12 years old, 13 years old, my high school transitioned. So it became Zimbabwe. Our school was originally about 500 kids. It was an all-boys school. You'd wear a tie. It was a public school, but that's how they rolled in Rhodesia and then Zimbabwe. And my school was basically 95% white kids and 5% really rich black kids. And then literally within the span of 1 year, I go back at 13 and it's 95% black kids and 5% really poor white kids, because all the white kids left the country or went to private school. And I was in the poor white kids section. And that was the second really big lesson for me was, hey, you know what? I had been taught to be a racist. It's how it was back then. White people and black people don't mix, although it wasn't like South Africa. It was much more collegial. We didn't have white only and black only toilets in Zimbabwe, or what was Rhodesia. It was an English run rather than Dutch run colony. However, we still were absolutely raised as racists. And it was interesting when all of a sudden you're playing rugby, getting drunk, fighting for girls with a bunch of guys who are just the same as you. And that was the second really life-changing lesson that was the beauty of growing up in Zimbabwe. It shattered my belief in institutional teachings. It made me question everything because I'm like, well, I was told these people were different than me and they're not. They're exactly the same as me, literally in every way. Other than most of them were better athletes than me, to tell the truth. But we still sweat and tackled and bled the same way on a rugby field. And so it was an eye-opening experience. Alongside that, I had to work my whole life. I left at 18 years old with nothing. I told my mom I'm going to America, and she said, why? And I said, well, I was watching a show called Dallas at the time. I'm like, I want to go be J.R. Ewing. And I leave with $200, which is the limit of what you could take from Zimbabwe. I land, I get mugged. They take all my money, everything, my passport, everything. And it was another signature moment of my life where I sat in a park bench in London, never having been in snow, with my Zimbabwean jacket that is not built for the snow, with my sneakers that are not built for the snow, going, okay, I would rather die here in London than go back home after 2 days. And then I went and got a job at a youth hostel, then got another job. And I ended up traveling for about 18 months before I started to pay my way through college. I then paid for my way through college, graduated, met my wife while I was in college 35 years ago now, and started as an intern at a very small RIA that used to time mutual funds. And I hated timing mutual funds. We were wrong 50% of the time, but I did love this idea that people had all these mutual funds that sold. And Lewis, you're too young to remember this, but in the early 90s, it was a commission-led world. And I very much believed that fees were more in line with clients. So I was 23, but I was a pretty good salesman. I had a nice accent, which gave me IQ points I didn't deserve. And I'd go on TV and people would come to watch seminars. And then I'd call advisors and say, hey, I will close 100% of your clients if you put them in front of me. And I lived up to that promise. I'd say, give me your worst client that you've sold mutual funds to. And I'm going to take those mutual funds and I'm going to manage them in an asset allocation. And we built our own custodian that traded omnibus at the big custodian houses. And really, we didn't know it at the time. We didn't know what to call it at the time. It turned out to be one of the first TAMPs in the country, a turnkey asset management platform where we'd tell advisors, you give us $10 million and we will pay you 10 basis points a month for those assets. And you don't have to do anything and we'll allocate it right. And if you're not happy, we'll leave the clients in any mutual fund they want. And that was the very beginning of the whole transitions to fees. And obviously we know how that went. Everyone started to go to fees. We sold that business in 2001 to General Electric. I was not ready to sell it, but my partner, who was much older than me, said, we've got a lifetime, life-changing wealth offer. And it was about 120 million or something like that. And we sold it to GE. They made me president of GE Private Asset Management. 6 months in, I say to my wife, or maybe it was 3 months in, on a 5-year contract, and they were paying me like a baseball player. It was real money. And I go home and I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. And she goes, you know what? Thank God you've been an ass since the day you sold the company. I said, what am I going to do? I was 34 at the time and I had 2 little daughters. She said, you'll just go do it again. And so I had a 2-year non-compete, which was enforceable. And I went to grad school, went to some pretty good schools, and they conceived of the idea of United Capital. That first business was called Centurion Capital. It's now morphed into being called AssetMark, which is a public company. And the whole platform was originally the thing that we built. And the second business, I'm like, everyone has now transitioned to fees, but the future has to be a client experience that's really delightful. And I happened to be at Cal, where they had invented behavioral economics several years before. I was fascinated by behavioral economics. And I thought, I want to build a consumer brand that redefines what it means to have a relationship with clients. And I wanted to bring emotions into the financial discussion. So we started with a very simple idea. Money is about feelings and emotions. It comes from the heart. And we're not going to go to the brain, because everyone else in the industry keeps talking about alpha and R squared and performance. I'm like, it doesn't matter. What matters is how people feel and what they do with money. So we're going to come with a narrative no one else has, but we're going to acquire firms to grow geographically. And we're going to build the first national RIA that has a client experience that feels like Apple. That was the idea. And we did 100 acquisitions. It went quite well. United Capital built some amazing client tools. I think we were a great brand, honestly. We had amazing people, incredible people. We were very particular about the people we acquired. And that grew to about $250 million in revenues, 800 employees, 20 to 30 billion, 25 billion to 30 billion assets. And we did get offered to, and I know you'll want to hear more about this story, but we ended up basically selling to Goldman. We can get into all of what happened since then. I know that there's a lot of questions that, but I'll give you my big takeaways from my upbringing. So the first one is, you own your life and it's up to you what you do with it. The second one is, don't hold onto any sacred truths, because a lot of what you believe to be true is simply an opinion that you currently have that will probably change when something happens to you. So I tend to be very open-minded. And the third is, there's no replacement for hard work. If you don't own it, be honest about it, and do your best, it's going to be hard to be really successful. Show up and do what you say you're going to do. And hopefully do it in a nice way. So it's been an amazing voyage. I am the living embodiment of the American dream, and I have 3 incredible daughters. I have an amazing marriage to a woman who inspires me every day. And I live in the greatest country in the world that allows you to reinvent yourself and push yourself to places that could not happen in any other country.
That was pretty powerful. I think my favorite one of your teachings was the example of, you were taught to be a racist growing up, but just understanding from your own experiences that every person is really the same. And that was your big takeaway of going against the grain, going against big institutions. It makes sense that you weren't long for life at General Electric, and then also, I guess, later on at Goldman.
Goldman, I will say, and we can talk about this more, it was 4 years, and it was one of the most invigorating and learning experiences of my life. But I came in at Goldman as a partner, which is very different than coming in at the tiny division inside of a firm like GE. So it was, again, we'll talk more, because I took away a lot of lessons there. It'll be very valuable to the people on this call, I think, about what I learned as being part of a major institution like Goldman, that I think is valuable, because we think because we're running a big firm internally that we know everything. And as I've shared, we don't know everything. More tomorrow than today, guaranteed. Every day you're going to know more than you did the day before. And so that was a really important lesson. But yeah, look, the reality is our industry is a remarkable industry, but it's only as good as the people who are in it and the work that they're doing. So it's been fun.
What's a view on wealth management of the industry that you once held true, even the last couple of years, that you've since reversed? You mentioned you're extremely open minded, and I can tell you don't hold on or anchor on to anything. So I would imagine there's been some pretty big aha moments or sacred cows you once had that now have changed.
I'll tell you one. We developed this incredible client experience called Honest Conversations and Money Mind that was a way to shorten the trust cycle, understand why you worked, what the purpose of money is in your life. And it was fantastic. And I believed in my core that the things that we do that are really special, everyone should have. And look, when you build a firm, you have the ideal archetype of what the perfect client voyage is. I've learned that sometimes that main purpose of that is to get the client to be a client. It's not necessarily faithful application of the same system over and over. The mistake I made early on in my career was when we would meet a client, we would not differentiate between the person who has a broken bone and is coming for a wellness visit. What do I mean by that? If I'm meeting with somebody and they're getting divorced, and they need to figure out how to deal with the financial implications, or they're being offered an early job retirement. If I don't address that issue up front, I am going to lose. Because if I start talking about the wellness visit and we do all of these other things, one of the things I learned was I got to meet the clients where they live. I have to know what's the thing they need, what's the itch I'm scratching, what's the pain they have. And the primary job of any great advisor is that, to help solve the problems that they have immediately. The second big thing that I have adjusted my view on over time is I used to think the advisors that were really good at taking care of clients were the same people that should be bringing in the clients. In fact, it's a completely different muscle. Honestly, the best business in the industry, I believe, not because I love necessarily what they do, but as a business application, is Fisher. And Ken very early on identified there is a difference between people who love to create discomfort and move people to you than the people who are great at creating comfort and keeping them with you. And the way you handle that is really important. So I think that's one big change. And again, the way the industry is going now, everybody looks the same. Everybody looks the same. Nobody is willing to think differently. And as we'll talk about in a second, you can't win in this industry with the mega firms that have resources you don't have. We used to compete against the wirehouses. Well, now the competition is much better than the wirehouses. Yes, the wirehouses look a lot more like we do, offering financial planning and open architecture and similar fee structures. But you now have mega firms with hundreds of billions of dollars that are in exactly your business, doing things better than you are. So how do you win? You have to be a niche player. You have to know this is the pocket of the industry that I can win in. And I'm obsessive about this thing, that if you're going to grow, you have to be clearly articulated. What is our competitive advantage? What is the brand promise I'm making, and to who, so that I can win? Because the more clearly articulated you are, the more distinct your offering is, the more likely you are to dislodge somebody who's a generalist. And the good news is these big firms are generalists. They have to be all things to all people, but you don't have to be. And what I notice too often is too many of the industries say, well, how does creative planning do it? Or how does wealth enhancement group do it? Let's do the same thing. And you don't truly win in this industry by copying people who can do things you can't do because you don't have the resources. You win by saying, I'm going to own this segment of the market and be the best there is. And once you've dominated that, start to expand. Michael Kitces talks about this. We talk about this a lot whenever we get together, that the winning firms are the ones that have a very clearly articulated brand promise. I'm obsessive about brand. And a brand is nothing more than a promise made, consistently kept. But it really matters who you're making that promise to. And too many firms have a name, but not a brand. And when we talk to dozens of firms with billions of dollars, and we say to them, we start by saying, what promise are you making? Like, why do you exist? What is the purpose of your existence, and whose lives are you making better? And too often it's, well, we're trying to do wealth management and we're trying to, like, it just, now the good news is your clients have a view of what you do that's special. You just need to ask them.
So much wisdom in what you said. I mean, I think it's welcome news for a lot of people listening that you don't necessarily have to be the biggest, be the creative plannings or wealth enhancement groups to be successful, that you really do have a recipe to win, which is focus on a niche, focus on something different and be world class in it. And then everything else takes care of itself.
And the way, but just to be very practical about this, your niche can be end clients, but it can also be the kind of advisors you work with. So you don't have to narrow your view to say we only work with these clients. Look, I know that almost everyone listening on this call, they just would take, when they started, like the niche was, do you have a pulse and do you have money to invest? Like, I know, because I've seen no exceptions to that rule. But as you evolve, you need to start saying, look, this is where we win. This is where we are the most impactful. And the best way to think about this is, who is it that we are most helpful to? Of our audience set, which are the clients who most benefit from our services? If I often think the mistake many advisors make is they approach the market top down rather than bottom up. And what do I mean by that? If I'm sitting in my beautiful living room here, looking out at the ocean, and I go, well, I think I'm going to solve this problem, and this is who we're going to sell to, that's very different than going to my clients and speaking to them and identifying which are the happiest clients, what do they have in common, and what is the thing that I do really well. And you might find that your happiest clients are a very specific size, a very specific age, in a particular geography, living a specific life. And if you can clearly articulate that, your own book will tell you, your own clients will tell you, this is who we win with. And we found out at United Capital, where we won the most was with the non-financial spouse. That it wasn't the engineers or the doctors. Where we won the most, and we evolved to realize we've got to talk to the non-financial spouse. So when you'd go to our website, we had flowers. We talked about beauty. We talked about things that no one else would think of doing. We didn't have the pillars of Chicago, the boardroom, and we've been around for 100 years. We just talk about, we want you to have a beautiful life. Because our client, our segment, was a non-financial spouse who had no interest in money and wanted to live a better life. That was our niche. It's a broad niche. It was niche nobody else owned. And what you want to do, building a brand, is own the mind segment of a specific kind of person. And if you simply sit with your most satisfied clients, which, by the way, 90% on this, people won't even have asked their clients, what do you like about us? And yet when we invest in a firm, it's step one to identify, what do we do with this brand? We know early on when we meet with the firms that we're going to partner with, we think this is their brand message, but we start by asking clients, so it is irrefutable. So when we come back for a firm like One Point that we rebranded that was called Bleakley, their own clients said, it's the relationship. These are people who want a lifelong relationship. That was the word we were going to own. As you'll see from their branding when we relaunched it, the word relationship is everywhere. We're in a lifelong relationship with you to enhance your life. So the messaging, the core promise, came from their own clients. We're doing the same thing with Grimes, our other partner firm. Their message is around a totally personalized, bespoke approach. So their own clients told us this is what we value. And from that, you can identify the niche. And it's not just the usual generic, age, it's psychographics. What kind of things do our clients respond to so that you can do the kinds of things that big firms cannot do?
Yeah. What's a way for someone who's, I think it's a brilliant method to really understand what makes you different? Because my guess is if I thought about what makes my company different, I'd get a completely different answer if I asked advisors I've represented. What's the best practice for someone who's interested in having this realization? Like, how many clients do you ask? Do you just ask 10, 100?
You ask 100% of your clients. You hire an outside firm that helps you to question, make it short, have a value statement. What do you value? Have the clients click, make it fun, donate some money for charity for every person who answers it. And then ask things that help you. This is one of our pillars of growth. There was a United Capital. It is with our partner firms. It will open the door to sharing feedback with our clients, with your clients. But it also helps you to really articulate your brand message. And I advise you to bring people outside your firm to assess and evaluate, because you will naturally be biased to looking for the things that you think you are rather than things that they think they are. And some of your biggest value drivers will be unexpected. They will not be things that you assume is true. And I'll tell you another thing for everyone on this call that I promise you the clients are not with you for. It is not your investment expertise. They are there almost universally because they like the person that they're working with, because they have confidence that person can solve their problems, and that they have the expertise available to them to do it. The mistake most advisors make is they then assume they think I'm the smartest guy in the room. But that's not the thing. The thing is, they trust you to solve problems and simplify their lives. That's what every advisor is there to do. Solve problems and simplify your life. That's what we get paid for. And in order to do that, you don't have to do it all. So a lot of these firms that I'm seeing now, we're going to bring tax prep in. We're going to bring in estate planning in. We're going to bring all this stuff. And I'm like, why? You can solve for that without doing it yourself. What the client wants from you is your sage advice. Every minute you spend doing a tax prep is a minute that you don't spend actually helping them on what really matters. That doesn't mean that tax prep shouldn't be a part of your offering. But should you have 20 accountants doing tax returns? Probably not, because that's the big mistake many entrepreneurs make, honestly, is this desire to solve it all themselves. They like to build things. And I'm always like, look, you should assemble things, don't build them.
It seems like a pretty impactful trend in the industry is the sentiment that clients are looking for more from their advisors or from their firms. And in order to justify fees at a certain level, I think a lot of firms, and it seems like pretty shrewdly, are adding these ancillary services in order to deliver more in-house and kind of be more like one-stop shopping. Are you kind of pushing against that concept?
I totally agree with that, but you don't need to build it in-house. Again, should you have tax prep? Yes, you should. But you can partner with firms like TaxFile that will do it, and you don't have to do it, but it can be white labeled for you. You can add banking products.
Right, so basically like offer it, but you don't have to employ the individuals that actually do the work for you.
And you know why? Because they're going to be a bunch of clients who don't want all that stuff. And if you have it in-house, it's just going to be part of like, well, now we got to take you to our tax prep. And it's going to overwhelm a lot of people who just say, I have an accountant, I have a lawyer. Thank you very much. Will you just please manage my money and give me a financial plan? You have to remember, every hotel has a gym, but about 8% of people use the gym. Now, you need to have a gym, but that doesn't mean the people are going to use it. Just like the pool. It's great that it has a pool, but how many people actually go to the pool? Very few. Unless, of course, you're in Hawaii, right?
Great analogy. So if you think about firms like Mercer or Mariner, two of the most formidable competitors in the space, I would argue that they have every service under the sun in-house. If you were a board member at those firms, or if Marty called you up directly, would you tell him that you think they're wrong to have it all in-house?
Because again, Marty has a size that most of the people listening don't have. So is there a control factor he could have? Now, honestly, if I was on his board, and I do know Marty, I've not spoken to him for a while, I can tell you that what we did at United Capital was get all of the efficiency and fully integrate it, but not take it on. There is an opportunity cost for every minute you spend on other things. I wanted our core competence to be the final mile to the consumer. I wanted to obsess on the client experience. We're going to spend all of our time and energy delighting clients, not worrying about did we get our tax returns out on time. And I can tell you, at my experience at Goldman, I was there for 4 years. I co-ran the business that was ACO alongside the United Capital. ACO was a world-renowned financial planning organization, provided planning for the C-suite of the biggest S&P 500, at least 50% of them. It's an amazing business with incredible advisors. I am still a client, by the way. And without sharing anything confidential about how Goldman operates, I can tell you that we did do full benefits consulting. We did do full tax prep for these executives in a world-class level. The firm would pay the planning fee, but not all of it was done in-house. In fact, a lot of it was done with partners. Was it white label for Goldman? Yes. But we take the same approach to services you do with investment solutions. Goldman could manage the laddered bonds and the laddered equity internally because it's very easy to do, but we use outside managers for alts and for other products. That same is true for services. If you take the same mindset for enhanced services as you have toward products, which is some things you can do in-house and some you shouldn't, because there are people who can do it better than you. The same approach you've taken to software. You're probably not building your own planning software because there's people spending millions and millions of dollars building great planning software. And your time is not valuable there. Most management teams in our industry don't think about where is our time most valuable. And I'll tell you the funniest part here, Lewis. When I ask these firms, and we do enterprise rating assessment where we benchmark firms on 3 categories: their management and business execution, their technology platform, and their growth strategies. We have 9 boxes and we heat map them. How are you doing? You will not believe the percentage of time people spend managing their growth pipeline, organic growth pipeline. You know what it is? Typically 2 to 3%. Do you know how much time is spent by firms like Fisher or like a healthy firm that's growing organically? 25 to 35%. So the management team has weekly meetings and never once do they ask, how many clients do we have in the pipeline? What's our closing rate? Where are we sourcing new strangers? Who's closing how much? Which advisors are closing the best? Which advisors have the highest retention rates? Those basic business practices, which I guess it goes against the grain of being a fiduciary, but I think they're not mutually exclusive. You should be a great advisor, a great fiduciary, and a great business manager. And if you're not spending 25 to 30% of your time managing your organic growth, you're going to have a mediocre business. And the other 25 to 30% of your time should be constantly delighting and innovating for your clients. Like, what are we doing to make us different? And if this is our niche, what are we doing to maintain the moat around our business? Those 2 things are almost ignored. It's a side hobby. And yet the whole business and your success is linked on those 2 pillars. So I find it, again, it makes it really fun to be back in this side of the fence, helping firms clearly articulate, how do we win? How do we measure and track it? And how do we align our interests so that we help and serve more people to win even more and help our advisors to be truly victorious? And again, that's how you build a great franchise.
No doubt. I honestly, anything coming out of your mouth, I would absolutely take it as the gospel. You've more than walked the walk, which brings me to, I think, an interesting conversation, which is your current venture, Rise Growth Partners. Can you share your thesis in one sentence? What is it that Rise is looking to deliver to the marketplace?
Look, it's very simple. The best firms that want to grow the most have no good choices for capital. And what do I mean by that? If you are a high growth, $5 billion, $8 billion firm, and you do not want to give up control, and you should not, because you're in the midst of creating value, your only choices are to give up control by selling to one of these big mega firms, and they get all the upside, and you get a piece of stock that's probably not going to grow as fast as you, or go to a minority investor that has no ability to serve or help you and just gives you money. And we created Rise for one reason. Most of these people have never run a business as big as they're running, and they need more than money. And I've done 7 capital raises in my life across 2 ventures. I begged to find an investor that actually could help me. And the problem was there was no one. You know why? Because they'd never sat in my seat. So I thought, I'm going to build a venture with people who sat in the seat that you are in, who have done things you haven't done, so you can avoid the mistakes. We can help you with your branding. We can help you with growth. We can help you with creating metrics and growth programs for your staff and surveying your clients and ensuring that you have a winning strategy, and then help you with sub acquisitions as a truly. And by the way, you can ignore everything we have to say. But if you look, and then when people say, and I don't know if you know this, Liz, but since we launched, which was not even 2 years ago, all the minority investors now say, of course we help you with it. Nobody was talking about being a true strategic partner. And for all their words, if you look behind the curtain, what you'll see is their people are nothing more than financiers. Go to our website at Rise Growth and you'll see we're all operators. My partner, Terry, she ran Schwab Retail. She was the number 2 at Wealth Enhancement Group, taking them from 18 to 65 billion. She sat in the seat. I've sat in the seat. Brian, who ran third-party technologies at Schwab, is on our team. The head of marketing, the CMO for Focus and Colony Group, is on our team. So when we invest in these firms, we have multi-million-dollar talent that they don't have to pay for. And we are, most importantly, the nicest people you'll ever work with. So we have 3 very simple rules in our firm. And I think we should talk for a second about culture, because we are in a service business. Your brand promise is as strong as your culture. And we, from the get-go, say we have 3 non-negotiable standards at Rise. The first one is we're good people. And what does being a good person mean? We're authentic, we're real, we care more about you as people than we do as workers. And we do what we say we're going to do. Number 2, what we do matters. We will only partner with exponential thinkers who want to change the world. And number 3, we love what we do. And so I can tell you one thing I can say without reservation, as was true at United Capital and true at Centurion. If you meet a Rise person, you will go, man, they really know their stuff. And wow, are they nice?
Yeah, right. It's a good proposition.
We're only, we align our 100% with the success of the majority investor, the person, the CEO that we're backing. And I think if you spoke to our partners, they'd say the same thing. They are doing things they could never have done without us. I mean, our first firm, at one point, they were about $8 billion. That was in September, a year ago, $8 billion. Today, they're at $13 billion. They're going to end the year around $15 billion. Their revenue will have gone from 75 million or so to something like 125 million by the end of this year. They've rebranded from being Bleakley to being One Point. They've developed an advisory council. They now have advisors who are partners who are incredibly excited about the equity that they own. They have a clear brand message. Their organic growth went from around 3%, 5%, to 10%.
Amazing.
On a $10 billion base. So it's a reigniting. I would tell you, I think Andy and Scott, whose birthday it is today, the 2 founding partners who are twins, that they are thrilled with the voyage and having more fun than they ever have. And I think they would tell you, hopefully, that they could never have done it without our help.
That's an amazing case study. And
we made probably 120, 130 millionaires when we sold United Capital. It's an amazing experience to just see people create magic. So that's why I do it. People are always like, why the hell are you doing this? It's incredibly rewarding, not just financially. For me, it's just the emotional, psychic income I get to say, if I didn't walk this earth, these things might not be happening. Like, that's just really exciting to me. Even though nobody will remember it 20 years from now, I'm just happy while I'm here that we can, as a team, really put a dent in the industry.
Yeah, I'm with you. I got to ask, I mean, I think I know part of the answer for why Rise decided to be minority investors rather than, say, more traditional private equity, which might take a control position or buy 100% of your equity and give you equity in an illiquid management company, or buy the entire business like you did, like the model you had at United Capital. What was your philosophical reason for being minority? Because I have to imagine with all the value it seems like you're adding, wouldn't it be better for Rise if you took a control position?
Yes, it would be better for Rise. But here's the truth. I have one regret about United Capital. And that was that the firms that had the ability to grow the most, there were 2 teams that joined us with 600 million. They got to 4 billion. Thanks to our help, each of them. They would have been better off with us as a minority investor advising them than they would have been joining United Capital. Now, they did very well. They've spun out on their own. But I look back and I'm like, if you have firms that are truly special It's not for everyone, but if they're really special, they would have preferred to have Joe and our team as minority investors where they could keep the majority of their equity.
No doubt.
That's the reality. And my question when we started Rise was, would there be enough firms that wanted that? Which turned out to be yes. And the second question was, could I get institutional capital to back them? And we spoke to 3 or 4 firms. They all wanted to invest. And our premise was very simple. You want to put $250 million to work. That means you have to take control or invest in things that are already big. And if you let us pick 6 or 7 firms, 5 or 6 firms, and invest $60 million each, we can take minority positions of firms that can definitely grow and be more valuable, and everybody wins. And again, we have enough credibility in the industry. They said, we think you can do it. We structured it so they didn't take any risks. I'm like, you don't have to pay any salaries. We're going to do it all. You just have to provide the capital and you get to approve the deals. And of course, it's turned out really well. Now we get a lot of inbound like, hey, can we be an investor and help do this next thing? But, again, what we do is it's very heavy lifting for the first 18 months or so. And then our job is to make these businesses completely independent. So we think of this as 3 phases. The first is dependence, because we're helping you to reassess, articulate what you want to do. The second phase is interdependence. You still rely on us, but we're helping you guide and do this yourself. And then the third phase is independence. And that's typically 18 to 24 months each phase, because we need you to get the highest multiple possible. And we have to make sure that you don't need us for that to be true. And again, some of them have already said, what if we want you to leave? We're like, our job is to make sure that you're like a child who doesn't want to, yes, we're going to be friends, but we don't want you to live at home. You're not going to want us living at home. We don't want you living at home. We want you to get out there and conquer the world.
It's so interesting because, I think the knock on a lot of minority investors or financial buyers in the space is that they're really good at writing you a check, infusing you with capital. Some are really good with sub-acquisitions, but there's oftentimes, I think, a rub around lack of strategic guidance or help with organic growth. Like to your point, a lot of folks talk the talk, but they don't necessarily walk the walk.
Honestly, there's only one minority investor that I have a lot of respect for. Honestly, the folks at Wealth Partners Group, they have lived up to every promise they made because they did what most minority investors didn't do. They say, we're going to do a few group of firms that have very specific inorganic strategies, and they have absolutely delivered on helping them do sub-acquisitions. Now, the thing I think might be missing, and I'm not criticizing here, that these firms need to be ready to take that on, which means that you need to have a strong promise and a strong platform and a strong management team and elements that also include organic growth. Now, again, they've done an amazing job, but I can understand why they have a winning formula. I can understand why you'd be interested in that. For many of the other resources, if you have a choice between firms like Rise or Wealth Partners Group, or simply somebody cutting you a check, that assumes that you know everything. And I will tell you, we wouldn't want to invest in that firm anyway, because the reality is, if you have smart people around you, you should use those smart people around you. Because I've never known everything. And I know when I went to Goldman, I thought I knew what good was until I went there. And then I'm like, I thought I was good, but there's better. And I absolutely, no matter what anyone says about Goldman, I can tell you, I learned a ton about how good can be.
Can we talk a bit about first the decision to sell your second major venture, United Capital, to Goldman? And then also, I'd love to hear the path you're going down about what you learned from Goldman about being excellent. But I know a lot of people were interested about the decision to sell this.
The decision was really easy. We had told the advisors in 2017 we were going to do a major capital event in 2020. I like to be ahead of time. And the markets were really good. And I said, you know what? We need to hit the bid now. We ran a process. We had 2 bidders, Goldman and another private equity firm whose name I won't mention, a very well-known tier 1 private equity firm. The economics were not wildly different. I asked our advisors point blank. We did a survey. I said, guys, this is up to you. Here's the 2 deals. If we don't do the Goldman deal, they will not be back. And 96% of advisors picked the Goldman track for 2 reasons. Their clients, could they ever find a better home for their clients? Probably not. Number 2, who doesn't want to be a Goldman advisor? Truly, for them. And by the way, here's what happened when we joined. Our advisors went our assets went from 25, 30 billion to $45 billion in a couple of years. All organic, all organic. There was so much inflow from the private wealth offices and from the corporate offices. It accomplished exactly what Goldman wanted. And the only reason it stopped is regulatory controls. It is a global bank. It required us to redocument hundreds of thousands of client documents. It was a huge cost on the firm. It did not work for the advisors, most of whom were RIAs. And again, Goldman did everything the right way because they're a regulated entity. They have rules that they have to follow. They don't have a choice. They're a global bank. And that is where, when they decided to sell it, to then end up, again, a lot of it went creative, a lot of it went off on its own. Decision was very simple. We cannot put our brand at risk by having regulatory issues. And I have total respect for that. And as one of the partners there, they made the right choice, to be perfectly honest. I can't tell you what I learned there.
Do you have any regrets about selling to Goldman, knowing what you know now?
Would I do it again? Yes, I'll do it again. Let me tell you why. Had we kept it independent, would it have gotten bigger? I don't know. If we had brought the private equity group, would we have succeeded? I'm sure we would. But sometimes the voyage is ended. And the first company, it was my baby. What happened with the second company? I'm like, hey, I'm building an apartment building. That doesn't mean that I have to be the owner of the apartment building forever. It's not my child. I'm not going to love it forever. People would always say to me, how do you feel about your baby? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, it's not my baby, man. I have my babies and they love me back. This is just a company. It's a thing I built. Now, do I wish I had thought about the regulatory challenges? Yes, I do have regret because we had an amazing culture, and not because the people at Goldman, because the people there are brilliant and amazing. Because of the regulatory requirements, the fit is just really hard. Now, I can't say the thing I'm really proud about having done. It reshaped the valuations in the industry, because when private equity saw what we exited for to Goldman Sachs, it put a different exit multiple, and everyone's math changed. And everyone says to me, if you'd have stayed independent, you would have gotten even more money. I'm like, that's not true, because we reset the market. And if I hadn't done it, I should have gotten roses from every other CEO and RIA, because guess what? The valuations and multiples they were able to get, honestly, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant here, but I know that it reset everyone's perception about the wealth management business and what they're worth.
We wrote an article about why the sale of United Capital to Goldman was a defining moment in the evolution of the RIA channel. Probably even more impactful than Focus Financial going public a number of years ago. Like, it was such a crazy moment that a startup, essentially, RIA, that was very successful in its own right, could be bought by a firm as venerable and reputable as Goldman Sachs.
Well, I only like to sell to Dow 30 companies.
Let me ask you though, I completely understand and respect your honesty about the fact, like you said about the apartment building, just because you built it didn't mean you had to live in it forever. What about from the standpoint of the advisors who, in your analogy, were the tenants of the apartment building? Do you have any regrets for them that they had sold to United Capital and that they're now part of Goldman?
Well, look, initially, no, because it turned out to be a home run. And the first 18 months, they're literally like, man, my own clients are giving me more money. I'm getting tons of prospects. I'm making more than I ever have. I love walking around and going to the country club and saying I'm a Goldman. Like, it does feel good. It's an amazing brand, honestly. And no matter what anyone says, it's like saying you went to Harvard. You know what? You don't like it because you didn't go there. The reality is it is a world-class brand and it's earned the reputation. I'll disclose, I have lots of stock in it, so I have a bias, but I haven't sold it because I believe in the firm. They are the smartest people in the room. That's the truth. And they are of the highest ethical integrity. That is also true. Even though they have made mistakes, which happens with big companies, I never experienced anything that would make me question who they are as people and their intent to serve their clients. Do they try to give their clients information that no one else has? Hell yes. They try to give their clients a competitive edge. And our advisors benefited from it. The last 2 years was hellacious for them, not because of anything other than the requirements. Of course, it was hard for them. It was really hard for me to sit there and ask them to do things that I knew they didn't need to do were it not for the regulatory requirements. But we had no choice. And most of them have ended up having sold their businesses 3 times, basically, keeping it. And so, look, yeah, do I wish that the first 18 months had continued ad infinitum? Yes, of course. Yes, I wish. That I also know that going back and being told this is how it's going to end, I'm not sure I would change. I would just go in knowing, oh, this is going to have a little bit of a bittersweet feeling, but it's still better for everyone than not. For the industry, for our people, for everyone. And I think I'm still very close with most of them. And what they would say is, those were magical times. Like the United Capital run was a magical time. But not all things last forever.
I mean, true. And honestly, a credit to you. I mean, I feel like United Capital was almost like the McKinsey or even like the Goldman of the RIA channel, where it created some of the best generational talent that is now running other firms, consultancies, et cetera, in the industry. So you definitely hit it right there.
And guess what? Rise is the same. We're going to build a transformational, industry-changing firm. We're not even 2 years in. We're already shifting the narrative, and it's incredibly exciting.
Excited to see. Let me ask you 2 more questions, 'cause I know you're a busy guy. There's a column that you write for CityWire that's incredible. I always learn 1,000 new things from it. But one of the articles I especially like that I think is very relevant to our core audience on this podcast is the concept that mega RIAs are starting to look like the wirehouses. Can you explain what you mean by this?
Look, I mean that what is ending up happening for almost every one of these mega RIAs that are controlled by private equity is it's all about getting through a big set of expansions so they can do a recap in 3 years. Their only goal is to bring in advisors. They have the same story. They have one platform, and the advisor comes in and basically does what they've always done, but under a new brand. They are not integrated. They're not delivering a unique client experience. If you go through one door, you get one experience. Go through another, you get another experience. I'm going to exclude both Fisher and Creative Planning from that discussion. I think they are fully integrated firms that deliver a unified experience. But the vast majority of them are building what I'll call Frankenstein firms, houses built of straw. They are an amalgamation of advisors, no different than Merrill Lynch or UBS, that just traffic under an RIA umbrella, which means what's their magic? And I think you're going to find their valuations, as the market becomes more sophisticated, will not be at the same level as the firms that are truly integrated. You're going to see valuations that will be 13, 14, 15 times earnings versus 20 to 25, because the organic growth, if you don't have a consistent client promise, is always going to be lower. And if you look at the organic growth for a lot of these firms, it is very subpar. It's 2, 3, 4%. And there's a second big problem with these firms. Who are they getting to acquire? The advisors who have no other choice, who don't believe in themselves enough to build their own thing. So you're ending up with subpar advisors or advisors at the end of their voyage who are just looking to cash it in. They don't, because you have to be willing to sell 100% control. So you're ending up with very limited organic growth. And you get to 200 billion, you automatically have a retirement outflow of assets. And if your clients are old and your advisors are older, guess what? You're going to have a very big outflow problem and no inflow to offset it. And what's happened with the rise of the minority investor, the great firms will never join one of these national firms until they're worth $1 billion. And what's going to happen is the firms that don't have an built-in organic strategy, who are acquiring old advisors with old clients, are going to find that it's very hard to sustain, because their half-life, clients keep getting 1 year older every year. The advisors get 1 year older, and they're not attracting young advisors who can build the business. And there's a second big problem. The G2 advisors at these firms have no equity. And there is an impending problem, just like the wirehouses, where we're going to start seeing poaching and outflows. You're seeing the lawsuits now, but you're going to see poaching and outflows of RIA to RIA, because there's a whole generation of G2 who don't have the appropriate equity. And the sponsor firms are just saying, well, as long as I get to the recap 3 years from now, it doesn't matter.
I honestly, Joe, I couldn't agree with you more. I've often commented that a existential problem facing the RIA industry especially is no one's really pondering how to keep and retain the next generation of advisors. The guys who didn't get the big bag of money to sell, who maybe didn't have to do business development, or maybe are and are great advisors, but have a 5-year non-compete and are captive and don't have the autonomy they once did to be great advisors and to solve problems. I completely agree with you. But I guess the counterpoint to that isn't scale and growing together and sharing resources. Isn't that a good thing?
It's great. As long as you're on the trajectory that gives you the upside of building it, you get the most wealth creation going from 5 billion to 30 billion. Once 50 billion, once you're at 200 billion, what's your bet? Is that business going to triple? And by the way, what kind of dilution are you taking and how much leverage is on the balance sheet? The reality is who will definitely win will be the private equity investors and potentially the management team. But the other reason I'm reasonably happily with that we sold was I knew what was coming next. If I brought in private equity, I would have to take on a bunch of leverage, and the rate of return for our underlying advisors would not be as high as it had been in the voyage from 0 to 25 billion. That's the truth. The truth is, once you get big, the advisors themselves lose the most. That's the truth. Because all of the equity creation undoubtedly goes to the private equity first. And they then add leverage to give themselves the dividend distribution that only they receive as soon as they can lever it up and get back their original investment. And when there's a recap, very little goes to the underlying advisors at the kind of return that would have been true just 5 years before.
Never thought of it that way. Let me ask you one question off something you just said, and then I have one question to wrap this up. I think I heard you say that firms that are big but are truly integrated, that you see a world where they can exit for 30, 40, 50 times earnings. Did I hear that correctly, or did I just have like a mini stroke?
No. Look, you've seen it. What are the valuations that you see for a firm like Fisher? It's high. Now, there's key man risk there. But once they resolve for that, it's going to be more valuable. It has a real organic growth strategy. I think creative will always be more valuable. I'm not going to name the firms that I think are less valuable, but there are firms that are not fully integrated. What's actually being done at Focus? It wasn't valuable in the public markets. It was, but not as valuable as it could have been. Why? This is a sum of individual parts. What are they doing now? Well, of course, they're trying to put it all under one brand and do exactly what I'm suggesting. They're going to have to disgorge several of their portfolio companies because they won't fit in. So there's going to be work to be done. But the strategy is very simple. We've got to have one focus. We have to be one firm. We have to have one brand, one culture, one platform. That's what they're striving toward. Now, will they win? I don't know. But I know that what they're doing is realizing if we want a good valuation, we have to be one firm. We have to have efficiencies and scale. We also have to have a delightful client experience. So that's how to think about it.
No, I think it's reasonable. And then if you were given the opportunity, which you probably had ample opportunities to do this, but let's just go my little thought journey with me, to build a $5 billion RIA within a handful of years. What do the first 90 days look like to go from legitimately 0 to 5 billion?
First, I have to think about who am I going to serve? Like, what am I doing that is not already being done? I always start with a question, how is my doing this thing going to make the world slightly better? First, I'd identify where's the opportunity. For me right now, it'd be Gen X, Gen Y. They are radically ignored. They have no good choices. They don't want their father's RIA or mother's RIA. So that would be where the great opportunity is. Second, I would have a strategy that would be salespeople and service people segregated out, but working as a team. Have a pyramid structure in my structure. And then I would spend an outrageous amount researching how do I get to market? And then I would probably buy a platform firm to start. I would reinvent it to be focused on this. It would be digital heavy. It would have AI embedded in every aspect, from the sourcing to the finding, to the servicing, to the shortening of the trust cycle, to behavioral economics tools, all throughout. I would use AI to embed every document, to run financial planning, to embed in the relationship. I would use humans that would have the ability to serve 300 households where it used to be 100 because of technology. And I would have a brand that would talk about the beauty of life and how we're going to help you accomplish it. That's what I would do. In my first 90 days, I wouldn't get it all done, but that's what I would do in the first few
It
years.
sounds like you just previewed for us Act 4.
No, I love what I do. We help our firms do that. And I'm never going back to being that guy. My job is to help build the next group of industry changes. That's what my active service is in this industry now, to build the next wave of exponential firms. I've done my thing. I've climbed Mount Everest twice. My job now is to help other firms create their own beautiful things. And that's what we do at Rise.
Amazing. So converting from mountain climber to Sherpa.
Exactly, right.
This has been so fascinating. I mean, just your viewpoints, the way you can articulate a value proposition, a vision. I even took copious notes about your idea, sampling or surveying clients to find out what your firm does in a world-class manner. So many lessons for really anyone, business builders, advisors, startup advisors. It was a very refreshing perspective. And I understand why you've had so many smart people follow you on these journeys all these years.
Thank you very much, Lewis. And I appreciate what you're doing for the industry, just sharing ideas. I'll end with one thing that I would encourage every human in this world to have. If there's one question that I would say has changed my life when I ask it all the time, is what if I'm wrong? It is something that opens the door to the possibility that you don't have all the answers. If I've been able to attract great talent, if we've been able to improvise and create new things, it's constantly asking the question, what if I'm wrong? And challenging myself and my viewpoints and remembering that humility is the source of every great invention in the world. That you start by saying, is this the best way? How would we do it differently? If I'm doing it this way, is this really the best? And what if I'm wrong? And what would wrong look like? What would be different? And that's where great things come, including great relationships, including being a dad, including being a husband, including being a CEO.
Absolutely amazing, Joe. Thank you so much. We'll have to do this again. You're a repeat guest. There's always something new to learn from you.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us. We'll be back with a new episode next week, so be sure to listen in.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.